Okay, moving on, we're going to talk about how an action potential actually spreads through the nervous system into the muscle. We call this propagation. It's spreading. Now, when I introduced you in the last video to the action potential, I kind of gave you the impression, and I didn't intentionally mislead you, but I kind of did mislead you perhaps when I talked about our circle diagram and the sodium rushing into the cell, depolarizing the cell, and kicking electricity through it. This actually does not occur in the entire cell. It occurs in just a little segment of the cell membrane. So that's what this PowerPoint slide's showing us. You see, we have this action potential, but it's not zapping the entire cell, okay? It's just zapping part of the cell membrane. And then, so we have depolarization in a small part of the cell. Imagine this yellow tube is a cell, and we have depolarization in just part of it. But this spreads through the cell, kicking the electricity down the cell membrane. So this could be a nerve cell or this could be a muscle cell, and we're moving the electricity through the cell, through a part of the cell membrane. All right. Now, what's going to happen is we get the action potential moving through the nervous system down to the muscle. So where the nervous system and the muscular system meet is called the neuromuscular junction. And the neuromuscular junction, just like it says, neuromuscular, nervous system, muscular junction. It's where they meet. Now, we've got a couple parts of the neuromuscular junction that you need to know. The end of the nerve is called the presynaptic terminal, and the muscle membrane is called the postsynaptic membrane. In between the two, in between is a gap. This gap is called the synaptic cleft. It's a gap where the nervous system actually does not touch the muscular system. And what happens is we have to jump that action potential from the nerve into the muscle. We have to jump that nervous signal into the muscle. And we do that with a neurotransmitter. Now, the neurotransmitter that moves the electricity from your nerve to your muscle is called acetylcholine. It's a neurotransmitter. In fact, let's just be clear here, it is this neurotransmitter in our circle diagram. So acetylcholine opens up these sodium channels and allows sodium to rush in. And so this occurs at the neuromuscular junction. Now, in order to relax our muscles, we have an enzyme called acetylcholine esterase that jumps onto acetylcholine and prevents it from grabbing on and opening those sodium channels, and that causes your muscles to relax. So I've got a different slide here that kind of shows you this a little bit in more detail. What happens is our action potential is going to move down the nerve. It's going to reach the end of the nerve called the presynaptic terminal. This presynaptic terminal has vesicles of acetylcholine. And what happens is this nerve impulse, this action potential, comes down, causes calcium to be released into the presynaptic terminal. And what calcium does is it signals these acetylcholine vesicles to dump their contents into the synaptic cleft. So acetylcholine floods out into the synaptic cleft and then attaches to the muscle cells' sodium channels. This opens the sodium channels and allows sodium to rush into the muscle cell, and that spreads that action potential. So what you're looking at right here, where the acetylcholine is grabbing onto the sodium channel and opening it up and sodium rushing in, well, that's just simply this in our circle diagram. This is causing depolarization of our muscle plasma membrane. Now, once that occurs, the action potential can then spread through the muscle. And remember, the ultimate goal of this is the action potential is going to signal those sarcomeres to contract. This picture on the right-hand side is showing this enzyme acetylcholinesterase blocking acetylcholine from grabbing onto the sodium channels to open them. So you stop getting a signal transfer to the muscle, and this causes the muscle to relax. So this is what we call this presynaptic terminal, or what we would call the neuromuscular junction. All right, now what's going to happen is our electrical signal is going to move through this muscle. And as it moves through the muscle, it moves through the sarcolemma of the muscle. That's the plasma membrane. And then remember, the sarcolemma has these T tubules, these transverse tubules that dive down into the cell. So the action potential is going to move through the sarcolemma down the transverse tubules, and it's going to tell sarcoplasmic reticulum to release calcium. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, its only job is to store calcium. Now, calcium, remember I told you back in chapter 6 that calcium is responsible for muscle contraction. What calcium does is it grabs onto this regulatory protein in the sarcomere called troponin, and it allows the actin and myosin to stick together so that they can contract. We're going to get to that here in just a minute. All right. I'm going to explain it in our handout 10E, how that actually happens. All right. Kind of as a preview to that, let's look at this next slide. So it says, how does a contraction begin? So how does our muscle contraction begin? Well, first of all, our nerve impulse is going to reach the presynaptic terminal, the neuromuscular junction, and it's going to release acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is going to move through that synaptic cleft into the muscle, attach to the sodium channels on the muscle, and open up those sodium channels so sodium can rush into the cell. This spreads the action potential to the muscle. Now that action potential is going to move through the muscle, down the sarcolemma, through the transverse tubules, and it's going to signal our sarcoplasmic reticulum to open up and release calcium. Calcium then binds to this regulatory protein called troponin, forms a structure known as a troponin-tropomyosin complex, which moves the troponin and allows the actin and myosin to slide. What this troponin is doing is it's blocking the two contractile proteins, actin and myosin, from bonding together and sliding. It's like a little lock that keeps myosin and actin from sticking together. So calcium moves that troponin so that the actin and the myosin can slide together. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at chapter pen handout E next and talk about this and kind of summarize the whole contraction of a muscle in one diagram here. All right,